Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to paint some rocks using pan pastels. We're going to paint a picture of rocks. And the real-time version of this is up in Critique Club right now. If you want to check it out, I will put a link in the video description so you can find it. So I'll be working on a blue pastel paper. This is actually the Canson XL pastel paper, which is the same as the Canson Me Tints. And I'll be working on the rough side. I basically have this tacked down to a piece of cardboard. It was actually the backing of a watercolor pad that I'm using there, and that's just going to keep it nice and sturdy while I'm working. I'll be using a variety of sponge applicators today, but if you're using pastel sticks, instead of using a sponge applicator, you're just going to color those colors right down on your paper. So that would be the big difference between pan pastel and using a stick pastel, simply how you apply it. Now, when you're going to switch colors with pan pastel, you simply wipe the sponge on a paper towel or a rag, and that's going to clean it and allow you to pick up fresh color. So it's a pretty easy medium to get going with. And the one thing that's nice about pan pastel is that pretty much everything you use sticks to the paper. You don't have a lot of dust and you don't get your hands all like chalky like you would with your traditional stick pastels. I've known several artists that never could really stand using stick pastels, but when they tried pan pastels, they loved them because they could use the applicators and the sponges and keep their fingers clean. Because it is kind of like a weird feeling to have that chalk on your hands, and some people really dislike it. It doesn't really bother me that much, but I do love how I don't get a lot of dust with these, and they're just quite effortless to use. Now, I say effortless, it doesn't mean that it takes no time. This painting took me about 3 hours, so I just want to mention that so that you have your expectations realistic. Because if you're sitting down to paint this in 24 minutes, it's not gonna happen that quickly. So what I'm doing here with this sponge is I am basically blocking in all the stones. Now all the stones in my reference photo, which I'll link down below, are all fairly roundish. They look like they've probably been just kind of tumbled by the ocean or something, and they must have washed up on a beach or something. That's where I assume the rocks came from. They all have a lot of beautiful colors in them. They seem to be a type of granite maybe, and I just was so taken by this photograph that I'm like, I really want to do a painting inspired by this. And I love rocks. Usually I'm painting more rustic, cracked, craggy looking rocks because that's what I see in the landscape around where I live in Maine. But these I just thought were so pretty and so unique that they deserved to be captured in a painting. And I thought pastel was just a great way to do it. Now you can see that really you can fill in some space quickly with these pastels and the sponge. And I really like that. Now, if you're on the fence about pan pastels and you would like to kind of try it without investing a lot of money, I would recommend you get yourself some really cheap eyeshadow. That's what I did before I bit the bullet and bought pan pastels. I went to Target, I think, and bought a $15 palette that had maybe 100 little eyeshadow colors. And really, this feels like painting with eyeshadow. That's how soft the pan pastels are. And I used it on a couple small little paintings just to see what I thought. I really liked it, and then I invested in pan pastels. And I started with a painting set of 20. And the reason I started with that is because it gives you all your basic colors in a pure format. And then you can add black or white to them to make your tints and shades and mix your colors really easily, because they do mix quite easily here, much more so than your stick pastels. So if you had a typical stick pastel range, you would have hundreds of colors, whereas the full pan pastel range of normal colors is 80 colors. And you can really do pretty much everything you need with those. So I feel that they're probably a little more affordable than your basic stick pastels because you can spend, $3 to $5 on a stick that doesn't have quite as much product in it, or you could spend $6 or $7 on a pan pastel and you don't have the dust. It all sticks to your paper. I just feel like it's a really good way to go. Now here what I'm doing is just defining some of the edges with a dark gray pastel. I think I'm using Payne's Gray from the extra dark shades set. Now I eventually over time collected all the colors, and how I did it was I bought the painting set of 20, then I bought the tints set of 20. Those are the pastel shades, basically all your colors plus white. Then I got the shades set of 20, which would be all your colors plus black. I think there's an extra gray. They don't give you white plus black. I think they give you maybe 2 extra grays instead of a black, and then you get extra dark shades, which is a little more black added to the colors in the shades tone. And that gives you all your 80 colors. So I would recommend, if you know you want all the colors but you're not ready to buy the full set at once because it's pricey, that you go that way, because you can mix pretty much everything from the painting set. And then as you add to it, you're just getting kind of more convenience mixes to go on top of that. And that will avoid you getting doubles. They also have portrait sets and landscape sets. But if you start buying those, you're going to have duplicates when you buy the other sets, if you end up going by sets. And I do recommend getting the sets only because it brings the per pan price way down. If you're buying them individually, I think they're probably about $7. Then when I did buy 3 individually, so I didn't start with the sets. Honestly, I actually bought a mixed media set because it was a pretty good price, and I played with that and I loved it. So I bought a couple. So what I did was I bought a magenta, cyan, and yellow first, and I played with those, loved them. Then I bought a mixed media set. And played with those, loved it. Then I went and collected the whole thing. So I do have a few duplicates just because I wasn't quite sure I wanted to, spend the money on a 20 set right off the bat. But I didn't, I wanted to eliminate, have the fewest duplications as possible. So yeah, you could definitely just buy your primary colors, play with it, and see what you think. And these are compatible with your pastel sticks and your pastel pencils. So it's not like they're going to take over and you can't use them with anything else. You totally can. So just you consider these as a really soft pastel. Now that said, you can use this as your first layers and go over with pastel pencil. You can go over with stick pastel. You can even go over that first layer with colored pencil. So it's really a wonderful media if you like to do any mixed media work at all. So I think, like, say you're somebody who likes to do art journaling and you love to incorporate faces in your art journal pieces. You could get some peaches, some pinks, some portrait colors. Maybe that's all you want to do with them. Maybe getting the portrait set would be the best buy for you. So consider the colors you use. You don't need to have every color. For these, I love having every color. I love that I have all of these, but it's certainly not necessary, especially when you're starting out. I would definitely, go easy when you're just starting out, unless you've tried them before and you love them. Now, I pretty much did this. I didn't use any stick pastels in this. I went back and forth between the pan pastels and my pastel pencils. I have a hodgepodge of pastel pencils, and I find they mostly work well together. So, it's definitely a use which have situation. I think for pastel pencils, I really like, I'm getting a lot more use out of the Derwents now. They seem to be working better the more I use them. I think they had kind of like formed a film on the leads, and that's why I didn't like them very much, because they seem less scratchy the more that I use them. But honestly, I really like the General's pastel pencils. They are very affordable. I think they come in a set of 12 or 36. There's a few different 12 sets, I believe, but and I think I just have a 12 set, honestly. But they're so soft. They work really well. They're easy to find. I think you could even get them maybe even at Walmart or your big box craft store, and they just perform really well. They're super soft, and I didn't have any issues with breakage. So that's what I would actually recommend if you want to try some pastel pencils. Now, you're not going to get the hugest arrangement of colors. Like, you're not going to find 60 colors. You're going to find 36 as the most. But for bang for your buck, I think it's a great way to start off. And then you can always pick up a more higher end pastel pencil if you need that extra range of colors. I haven't had any issues with fading because I'm not using them for a whole painting. I'm just using them to kind of add definition and whatnot. So this little tool here that looks like a palette knife, that's pretty much what it is. It's a plastic palette knife, and you get these little foam socks that slip over the ends. Now, you can buy those palette knives and the little blendy sock things separately, and that's actually another thing I started off with because I was hoping that I could just buy those tools and I could use them with my regular sticks. My stick pastels were not quite soft enough to pick up the pigment with those tools. However, if I wanted to draw and sketch with my pastels, I could use those blending tools to blend and push pigment around and really get nice effects. So that's also something you might want to consider. You can also use eyeshadow applicators. I found some at the Christmas tree shop once, and they had different colored handles, which were really handy because then I could have one for red, one for blue, etc., etc. And they work just as well as the ones I'm using in this video. The ones with the black handles are from Jane Davenport. They're called baton blenders. They will work as well. I think Michaels carries those. But, you can definitely shop the beauty aisle. Sometimes you can get art supplies for cheaper, because the one thing I'm noticing a lot about art supplies lately is there are a lot of art companies taking makeup applicators and kind of selling them as fancy art applicators. And they're not even really fancy ones. They're more like, Dollar Tree quality ones. So you can definitely look around, see what you have. Maybe you have a bunch of eyeshadow applicators you're not using. Maybe you have eyeshadows you're not using and you want to play around with those. Do it. What's the harm in it? Yeah, it might fade because the pigments they use in cosmetics are non-toxic and they're not meant to last forever on your face. You know, they don't need to last for 100 years. So you probably will have some fading issues with those, but to get the feel of it and see if you like it, I don't see anything wrong with that. So after I based everything in, I pretty much went rock by rock, and I started in the center because I wasn't sure how I wanted to approach all of them. I didn't know if I wanted to have a couple that were really detailed and then just let the focus fade off towards the edges. I think that would be pretty. You could even just do one area detailed and let the rest just kind of fade off. But what I think is really cool is as you're watching the painting build, just by adding a little bit of layering, a little bit of detailing on those stones, it really makes them look three-dimensional. Now, one thing I forgot to mention earlier was that after I blocked in everything with the big sponge and I went in and did my, like, that dark definition between all of the stones, what I did at that point was I took the painting outside into the garage, put it into a big box, and I sprayed it with fixative. And that locked that layer down. So even if I rubbed it with my finger, it wasn't going to move. Now that meant that I could layer on top because Pastel is really soft. So if I didn't, it wouldn't accept that much more color. So I thought I did try working on top of it without using the fixative, but it wouldn't really stick that well. I couldn't build it up the way I wanted to. So after that first layer of Pastel, I just did 2 light coats of fixative, one applied horizontally and one applied vertically. And that really did the trick. And I just did it in my garage. My garage is heated, so if you're in a cold climate, I don't recommend spraying fixative below like 50 degrees or 60 degrees, because I think that it could, having it freeze like that is probably not great. You certainly wouldn't want to let the can of fixative freeze. But so if you have an area like in a garage or someplace that's out of your living space where you can spray that would be great. I don't think you want to breathe in those fumes. In the summertime, I just go outside and do it. But, you just want to make sure that you've locked down that first layer. Oh, if you don't have fixative, you could use some like Aquanet hairspray. That's usually what I use if I'm like, I'm just making a card or something. I use Krylon workable fixative. It's not that expensive, but it's about 3 times more than like cheap Aquanet hairspray, aerosol hairspray. So I'll use that on a card. But if I'm doing like a painting that I want to last, then I'll use fixative. And you can find fixative at any of your big box stores. You might even be able to find it at the hardware store. I'm not sure. But I know the big box craft stores sell it for, I would say between $6 and $10, or you can order it online. Blick carries it. And I think they ship, I'm not sure if they'll ship it to Alaska or Hawaii, but they will ship into the contiguous 48 states. I know with aerosols, sometimes you can't get things shipped everywhere, but I've never tried the fixatives that you apply with a mouth atomizer. So if anybody has, I would love to hear about that in the comments below, because I'm not crazy about aerosols. I mean, if I didn't have to use an aerosol, that would be more environmentally friendly. So if you've ever used that, I've seen it sold as an art product before, but I've never tried it. Please let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to see if you get a really nice fine mist, or if it's splotchy, or what your experiences have been. I just really love how buttery these pastels apply. They're just so textural and fun to play with. I think maybe because it feels like you're kind of like playing with makeup. I don't know. It's just lovely. Now the little applicators, I figured you're probably kind of curious at how long things last. The little applicators, you can do many paintings with those. You wipe them off to change colors, and if they start to like kind of fray, not really fray, but sometimes you'll see it'll just kind of like start to tear or wear down, you can gently pull the little sock off and flip it around so you use the other side on your palette knife, giving you an extra use out of it. So you basically get to use both sides. You can wash them and let them dry and put them back on the little palette knives. I find though they last the best for me if I just wipe them off after colors and leave them on until they start to disintegrate. I think washing them does shorten their life. The sponges, however, they're similar to a makeup sponge, except they're very dense. They're like if you were to squeeze it, you'd get a much more, it's not going to compress as much as like a makeup sponge, a makeup wedge. They're firmer, more like the beauty blenders, like those egg-shaped ones. They're actually a little firmer than that, in case you want a little bit of a point of reference. So like if you wanted to get some beauty blenders and play with your eyeshadows and, blend your pastels with those and kind of get an idea, you totally could. But the Pan Pastel ones also I'm not sure if makeup sponges are, but the Pan Pastel ones they're called hydrophobic. You can actually use them with like acrylic paints and things like that, and it doesn't absorb the media. It leaves the media on the surface, which is kind of interesting, and I like that because it makes you not waste product. Even if you're I haven't used them with acrylics. I know some acrylic artists do. I'm not really an acrylic artist. I might use acrylics to base coat a canvas or for some mixed media that I'm going to oil paint over. But, you know, I don't use acrylics on their own that much, so I really can't speak to that. But I do know some acrylic painters use those because they don't waste the paint like a brush would. Like, you know, if you're using a big brush, it soaks in so much paint. And when you wash it, you're washing it and washing and washing and wasting all that paint, where the sponges don't for like base coating and stuff. So, so they're neat, and you can totally wash them out. I will wash them out, like, I don't know, maybe if I'm using the pastels a lot, maybe once every, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 paintings or something. You really just wipe them off on a paper towel. It's pretty darn easy. When you're doing the pinks, and you like that, some of these rocks are kind of like a reddish pinky rusty color, and when you go to highlight those, I would recommend using like a light peach color or even a yellow to do some of the highlights, or even like a really, really pale blue to get that natural light bouncing around. That way you won't end up with pink highlights. You'll end up with a very natural peach to slightly blue highlight, which you would get from natural light outdoors. Now here, I've been doing this around these pencils. I'm not sure if you noticed it or not, but because I have this severely time-lapsed, guys. You probably noticed that because I don't paint that fast. I'm using a black pastel pencil. You could also use like a compressed charcoal pencil for this as well. And I am going in around the rocks, and I'm kind of outlining and scribbling on some shading, and then using one of the little palette tools there, the triangle pointed one, to go in there and just kind of smudge out that dark and feather it back. So I have a sharp shadow where I see the sharp shadows, and then it feathers out to where I see more of a softer diffused shadow. So that's also helping, giving these rocks a little definition and making them look a little three-dimensional, because when you have that blurred shadow going onto the rock underneath, it makes it look like it's further down. And I just love how it looks, how you can almost like see down in the depths of like between the rocks. Like, you know, if you walk on, well, you know, I know a lot of you guys probably have oceans near where you live that are like all sandy beach. That's not how the ocean is up here. The ocean up here is very rocky. So when you're walking the beach, you know, up in eastern Maine, you're walking on rocks. So it definitely reminds me of walking the beach up here, where you just kind of look down, you see so many rocks, and maybe you're looking for beach glass or something like that. It was such a fun thing to paint, because one of my favorite things to do is just beachcomb, you know, either lay in the sun in the summer or beachcomb the rest of the year, because it's just so calming. You hear the ocean water rushing in, just this gentle waves. It's more gentle waves up here where I am. And it's just really lovely. We do see colorful rocks. I think these are a little exaggerated, but yeah, it definitely feels comforting and feels like home, and is just such a nice, it's just a nice thing to paint. I like rocks. I want to talk about some of the design elements in this painting, because I think that's important to why it looks pleasing, even though it's just basically a pile of rocks. And the first thing would be repetition. So there's a lot of repetition. This painting is literally all repetition. It's all rocks, all the same subject, but we have variety because we have different textures, and we have different sizes, and we have different colors. So that adds interest. And we have rhythm because we can go from rock to rock to rock. Our eyes will dance from rock to rock to rock, and we'll just kind of keep looking around and around and around the painting. So it piques your interest, it catches your eye, it's something you can keep looking at and enjoying, and it's those design elements that really pull the piece together, even though it's literally just a pile of rocks. So maybe you have a pile of buttons, maybe you have you know, something that is meaningful to you, that you think is really visually appealing, but you might think, well, I can't paint a painting of that, that's boring. Maybe you have a basket of eggs, but they're like the those softly pastel eggs, like from the what is that chicken that lays they're called Easter eggers, but there's actually a scientific name for the chickens, but they lay like very softly pastel toned eggs. If you have something that gives it some variety, it will be an effective painting, especially if it's meaningful to you, because you're going to paint it with passion and love, and you're going to show somebody who wouldn't look twice at a pile of eggs or a pile of rocks or a pile of buttons. You're going to show somebody what you see in it. You're going to show the muggles what the artist eye sees. And I think that's probably one of the most special things that we can do as artists, is we can show non-artists the, you know, the world through our eyes, and we can make them stop a moment and appreciate the beauty that's around them. So I love paintings like this, these common objects that would ordinarily be passed by or not looked at twice, and you know, kind of give them a little bit of significance and make them noticed by people. So I like rocks. I paint rocks all the time. I think if I'm painting a landscape, you can almost bet there's going to be a rock in it, because I'm typically not someone who paints landscapes, but rocks I love. If I see something with a bunch of rocks, then I will be down with painting that landscape. It's I don't know if it's because I live in an area that has a lot of rocks and ledge and stuff like that, or what it is exactly, but I've always just really loved painting rocks. Not painting on rocks, but just painting pictures of rocks. I really like to capture the things that are unique in each rock. So if there's like a scar or some like almost like flaky bits on it, I like to capture those things. If there's like rust or cracks, or like sometimes you can see like layers of different rocks. Is that shale? I like to capture that. I like to capture whatever imperfections make the rock unique. Now you'll notice that the rocks that are on top, they look on top because of the line. If you can see a complete line around a rock, that means it's on top. If you see a rock that the line is broken by another rock, then it's being overlapped by something. So I think having a variety of different rocks like that, having some that are on top, some that are underneath, some that are completely on top and some that are completely underneath, and some that might be under one rock but over another rock, helps give a nice, appealing look to the picture. It helps with the rhythm, it helps with the design, and just looks nice and natural. You don't want to have your rocks lined up like soldiers. You don't want it to look like people placed those rocks. You want it to look like you just happened upon a pile of rocks and decided to paint it. And that gives it a much more natural look, I think. You'll notice that the highlights stick really well because pastels are an opaque medium. I think that's something also kind of interesting. If you're someone that typically paints in watercolor or does marker art, you're going to find that probably these are very freeing because you don't have to reserve whites. You can put your whites on top. In fact, the white pastel is probably the most potent color out of all of them because it's super opaque, so it just kind of like covers up whatever you put it on top of. So you do need to be aware of that. Now that little, do you see that little rock there that looks kind of like a butt? That was kind of like bugging me, so I'm like, I gotta change this, or I'm just gonna look at that and all I'm gonna see is a butt every time I look at that painting. So I had to turn that rock, those two rocks, into one rock so it wouldn't look like either a peach emoji or a butt looking at me from there. And I also changed the color because I just, you know, once you see it, you can't unsee it, so I just had to completely change it. But you're the artist, so you can do that, and you can change anything. And that's another good thing about the pastel is that you can completely, if you're like sick of it, if it's not working, you can spray fixative on it, workable fixative on it, and you can go right over it. So you have a lot of flexibility here. You're not locked down like you might be with, say, watercolor or markers. If you've already started a piece and you're, you know, halfway through, you're kind of locked into where you are. You can't make super big changes, but you can with pastel, which is really forgiving, and it's really wonderful for mixed media because you can layer this over other medias. So if you have that watercolor or that marker artwork, as long as it's on a paper that has a little bit of texture to it, you can go over it with the pastel and you can like smooth things out or change things completely, which is really nice. I'd say probably more so over watercolor because you'd be on a more textured paper. If you're going over a marker paper, it just would probably be too slick. Maybe if you sprayed it with fixative, it would grab, but it's going to be a little too slick. But it's definitely a great way to be able to alter paintings that you might not have been happy with. And there you have it. Here's a picture of the finished painting. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you'd like a real-time version of this, all 3 hours in its glory, fully narrated, you can find that on Critique Club. Link is in the video description along with the supplies I used. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.